So we've been having a lot of wrestling news come out in this past, weekend, New Year's weekend, if you will, and Happy New Year to a lot of you out there. It is indeed January 1st, 2024, the first day of the new year. But yeah, like I said, we've been getting a lot of news coming out, in the wrestling world between AEW, WWE, and, so on. Um, and the one big one that got a lot of people talking was the Chris Jericho situation. And I will say this. I'll put my thoughts to this. You know, when you have a little bit of the bubbly, if you will, or whatever alcoholic, um, I guess you could say, consumption that you consume, you know, you're bound to do some dumb things, or you're bound to not think things through. I should say you're not bound to think things through. You know, uh, so to speak. And on early Christmas morning, Chris Jericho decided to respond to what Stephen P. New, the lawyer of CM Punk and many other wrestlers, as well as maybe celebrities and stuff and athletes. He decided to respond by basically saying that he, unlike the elite, Kenny Omega, the Young Bucks, Hangman Page, he, did not sign any NDA. And the reason he said this is because of the fact that we found out that the reason we will not hear anything about the media scrum, the brawl out from over a year ago, after All Out and everything that occurred between CM Punk and the Elite, after CM Punk had his, I guess you could say, his meltdown, or just took the opportunity to ragdoll the company he was working for at the time, right, just as he's sitting next to the guy that, signs his paychecks. And anyway, long story short, you know, we all know about that situation. Pretty much everybody knows what occurred after that. Well, we have been wondering, as fans and even those on the inside, have been wondering and curious of, okay, how exactly did this start? Like, who is really, responsible in the long run? Like, who threw the first fist? Who, how did Ace Steel ended up biting, Kenny Omega's arm and so on? Like, what really happened? Well, Stephen P. New came out on a podcast recently. I think it might have been Busted Open Radio. It might have been something else. I can't. You guys can correct me in the comments if you like. But he came out on a podcast recently, and he basically said that the reason we will not hear anything from Punk, Ace Steel, or even the Elite is because they signed lifetime NDAs. And what that means is that for the majority of their careers, if not their entire life, they cannot spill the beans about what happened unless they want to face some legal consequences. Now the catch though is Ace Steel's wife Lucy did not sign an NDA. So if she chooses to go out and say, "Hey, this is what I saw," then she has the right to do so. She probably won't because she doesn't want to get her husband in trouble, but she has that right. Well, Chris Jericho decided to take to social media after that interview happened, and again, like I said, in the wee hours of Christmas morning, decided to basically tell, or not tell, but respond to Stephen P. New by saying he's never signed any NDA, and he's never had to sign any NDA, period, in all the years he's worked for AEW. Well, Stephen P. New, basically said, yeah, you do have to sign an NDA. It's in your handbook, and da da da. Stephen P. New basically came back at him and said, yeah, um, he, he came back at him and he said basically, and it's early. I do apologize while I'm doing this. It's about 7:46 in the morning. But like I said, Stephen P. New came back at him and said, "Yeah, you do have a handbook that states that if something like this comes up, you have to sign NDAs, and you do have certain rules you got to apply to." Well, Chris Jericho again responded back, and there's many people that have talked about this. JD from NY206, Solid Monster, Alex Hicks of Just Alex's World, I should say, and OTRS Central, and many others. Anyway, they went back and forth, and then Jim Cornette decided, because Jim Cornette also is represented by Stephen P. New. Jim Cornette would always advertise him, in his Jim Cornette Experience podcast. He chimed in, and he kind of torched Chris Jericho. He kind of torched him by basically comparing the fact that CM Punk in his short term with the company, made AEW more legitimate and relevant, and did everything that a star or numerous stars in a wrestling company like AEW need to do, from sellouts and attendance, pay-per-view buys, views, and all that, merchandise and all that. And he basically said he has done more. Long story short, to put it plainly, he said he has done more to make that company relevant in his very short term than you have throughout your entire term. Yeah, Cornette, when he wants to, as everybody's pointed out, will burn you. He will light a torch and burn you. He'll pour gasoline on it and he will burn you. Well, if that wasn't bad enough for Chris Jericho, because after Stephen P. New called him out and said, "You got this handbook," and da-da-da, and then Jim Cornette said what he did. If that wasn't enough, you would think that would be the end of it, but it wasn't, because Chris Jericho's week just got worse. Literally, on the day of AEW's World's End pay-per-view, their last pay-per-view of the year, accusations came out that he may have done something that he shouldn't have done, and it's not a good look for him or AEW. And it has to deal with independent wrestler Kylie Ray, who is a very likable person. She has a bubbly personality, but she also has, a bit of a, I wouldn't say mental disorder, but she basically, has to at times retire or step away from professional wrestling for her mental health. That's what it is. So, she still competes, but when she feels like, hey, I need to take a, time away from this, I'm going to do so. That's why you don't always see her, working for the major companies, very long, because it's too taxing on her, I think. It's too taxing on her mental health, and she has to take time away. And she said, and she basically, any place she has gone to, from AEW to TNA, including a brief little appearance in WWE under a different name, because that's WWE, that's what they do. She's always been very complimentary of them. She's always been very complimentary of them. So, what happened though, and the reason she's involved in this, is apparently there came a report, from somebody anonymously. They basically blurred out their name, and everything. I think it was on Twitter or Instagram or something, but they blurred out the social media name. And they basically mentioned that Kylie Ray, when she was with AEW, was told to go to Chris Jericho's room, his hotel room, noting that others would be there. But as soon as she got there, she didn't see anybody else except Jericho, and lying in a position or something. And apparently, he made a pass at her, and it was enough for her to get freaked out about and leave. Now, some have pretty much kind of tried to piece it together that might have led to her her departure from AEW, although she has not really said much about that. She basically said that nobody's forced her to leave or anything like that, and so on. But her replying to it and everything, her replying to these accusations that Jericho's getting and everything, and then Nick Hausman, basically coming out on his podcast and talking about this, talking about it a little bit, and then going back and forth with Jericho on Twitter, because I think Nick Hausman responded to Jericho when when Jericho said he's never had to sign an NDA in his life. I think Hausman on his podcast and on social media responded by saying, "Oh, well, what about all the NDAs you've had other people sign?" And Jericho ended up blocking him, which in today's day and age, when you think about it, is not a good sign when for you or even those that you are associated or you work for by extension. It's not a good sign when somebody calls you out and says, "Hey, well, what about these NDAs you had people sign?" And then in response, instead of responding back by saying, "I don't know what you're talking about, show me the proof," he blocks him. And when you do that, that basically makes you look more guilty. And this is not a good situation for Chris Jericho to be in, because obviously the fans in Long Island at World's End, and you can tweet JD from NY206. You can tweet him. He was there along with his TNT Tuesday Night Titans co-host Andrew Badella. And they'll tell you he got booed. There was some cheering, but there was mostly boos. It's because of what they heard and everything. So how this, gets rectified in the future, we'll have to see. But what makes it even worse is Tony Khan. Tony Khan did not, answer the question that inevitably did get asked, at the media scrum, after World's End. He didn't ask. Oh, he didn't answer, I should say. He didn't answer the question when somebody asked it. He basically spun around it. He basically, said, "Oh, I can't, answer these. I can't. I don't want to answer rumors, if you will, internet rumors." So, yeah, it doesn't make Tony Khan look good when you have people like Hausman, and everything saying, bringing that up, in response to Jericho telling Stephen P. New, "Hey, I never signed an NDA. I was there. Because this is what started it on Christmas Eve. He said basically, I've never signed an NDA, so I can go out along with Ace Steel's wife and tell people what really happened because I was there." But then you had Hausman respond by, I think on his podcast and on Twitter, asking, "Well, what about all the NDAs you had people sign?" And then, basically the match was lit and away we went. So yeah, it's not been a good, holiday week so far for Chris Jericho. And now he and AEW by extension have to find a way to get out of this. They have to find a way to get out of this and move forward, because if not, this is not, because if not, this is the one thing that's going to overlap, AEW for most of this year, at least the first half of this year. It's going to be what overlaps them. Because one thing people did complain about a little bit is, despite whether or not you liked World's End as a whole, whether you liked the last 3 matches, whether you were a fan or not a fan of the Devil reveal because it was too predictable or not, a lot of people have said that, the thing that's ultimately going to overshadow all that is this Chris Jericho situation. So hopefully Tony Khan and his team, and Jericho and his team, can figure out a way out of this mess. Either just confess, basically, like, yeah, maybe something did happen with me and Kylie Ray, but I can't remember much, because maybe he can come up with a reason. Maybe he was drunk. Who knows? And Tony Khan, he said, if he knows anything about it, he's got to have to come forward and say, yeah, to keep, kind of keep pace. He's gonna have to be a boss, swallow his pride, and be like, yeah, I did hear something about it, and I did talk to Chris about it. Say that's not appropriate. That's not how we do things here in AEW, and then go from there. But right now, this is not a good look for them to start 2024 out on. But let me know what your thoughts are. Comment down below. Who do you think is in the right? Who do you think is in the wrong? What do you think really could have occurred? Let me know in the comments, as well as on the live chat during the premiere. Like the video. And until next time, guys, I'm out.